Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
Because that's what I do. I make deals.
That's what he does. He makes deals, and our world lead officials are rushing to finalize the logistics of Friday's Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. As of now, only limited details have been announced, including the city, the venue where the two world leaders will meet, and more. Officials are also working out what topics are going to be allowed to be discussed, although President Trump hopes to yield significant progress towards ending the war in Ukraine. He is going to do that without Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky present for that conversation. At least that's the plan as of now. Nick Payton-Walsh is in Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine. And Nick, Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russia is definitely not preparing for any sort of ceasefire. What has been his response to being left out of the summit?
Yeah, I mean, President Trump held out the possibility he would call Zelensky after his meeting with Putin, maybe even arrange later for the three men to meet in some capacity. But Zelensky from the start has been very clear that nothing can occur without Ukraine, about Ukraine without Ukraine. And today kind of went on the informational offensive, saying that the information they're getting, their intelligence, suggests, in fact, Russia's not preparing for peace. Instead, it's actually preparing more offensive operations. Indeed, there have been some alarming reports by open source analysts suggesting that in some parts in the east, Russia's made significant progress in just the last week, causing alarm bells to ring. Look, Zelensky's also had quite a lot of support from European allies who've demanded the same unconditional immediate ceasefire that the US originally proposed with Ukraine months ago, and that being the starting point for negotiations. And also, too, a European statement has insisted that the current contact line is essentially frozen as the starting point for negotiations. Could there be swaps? It's something really that Trump has talked about in terms of territory going back and forth between Russia. Always hard to know, indeed, what Russia could potentially give back to Ukraine, of Ukraine. But also to Germany's leader, Friedrich Merz, now arranging a call for Wednesday between himself, European leaders and President Trump, presumably to shore up Europe's position ahead of the Alaska meeting, Jake.
So you just talked about this land swap idea that the President Trump talked about. Has Ukraine weighed in on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, this has always been an absolute no for Ukraine. The concept of giving voluntarily land that Russia has not occupied by force to Russia as part of a deal. That seems to have emerged during US Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff's visit to Moscow. Different permutations emerging, some suggestion potentially that there hasn't been a full understanding of Russia's position, which appears to be very maximalist, still essentially wanting all of Ukraine. In fact, President Trump suggested he was one of the people who still thought that Russia wanted all of Ukraine when he spoke today. So a lot still riding on that, but the idea we've been seeing ourselves today, travelling around the very areas of the Donetsk region, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, towns that are full of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians, bustling a normal life there. Yes, air raid sirens on very often, massive damage done, but tens of thousands of people there who think it's frankly surreal that two men in Alaska on Friday from America and Russia might decide whether they will have to pack up and leave and hand over their homes to Moscow. Very far-fetched to Ukraine's government, almost absurd when you stand in those areas yourself, Jake.
All right, Nick Payton-Walsh, who's in eastern Ukraine for us. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Let's get some analysis from our experts now. Jeff, let me start with you. Jeff Edmonds, how do you think Zelensky feels right now? I mean, he's been trying to hold his cards close to his vest, I suppose, but it does seem as though he would be worried.
That's right. He's playing a careful game here in the sense that he wants to keep U.S. support. So he doesn't want to upset President Trump in the same way you had the fallout with the Oval Office. But at the same time, I mean, he is the president of Ukraine and responsible for Ukraine and its sovereignty and needs to do what he has to do to protect Ukraine. And so I think it probably does feel rather surreal that he wouldn't be in the conversation.
And I want you to take a listen, Rebecca, to what J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, said just yesterday.
I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
That's rough stuff. I mean, there's a lot of like blaming Ukraine subtextually in that. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because Vice President Vance used to oppose even selling American weapons to Europeans who would give the weapons to Ukraine. So it's nice to see him now take President Trump's position, which is that the United States still has a strong interest in seeing a strong
Little silver linings from you there. Okay.
A little silver lining. I will also say there was recent polling done by the Vandenberg Coalition just last week that 87% of Trump voters still understand that Russia poses a threat to the United States. So I'm not sure which piece of the coalition the vice president specifically talking about, but Americans understand that Ukraine security is related to NATO security. NATO security is related to American security. You want to have good trade deals with Europeans, you have to have a strong and peaceful Europe, and that means a strong and secure Ukraine. So I think that Ukraine is in a better position than we were a few months ago, and it's hard for Zelensky, I think, to be quiet, but it would be good for him to kind of just let this play out a little bit. I'm not confident that Putin is even going to concede anything at all, so it's good just to let this kind of summit play out.
Yeah, what is there that would suggest that Putin is going to concede anything? I mean, he, by all accounts, like he's winning in some areas, right? And it doesn't seem like President Trump and Vice President Vance particularly like Zelensky or support him and this venture. I mean, what's in it for Putin to concede anything?
There really isn't anything for it. The most important thing I think to consider is that this is not about land. I think a lot of people presume that it is. It's about the demilitarization, the denazification of Ukraine. It's really about Ukraine's sovereignty. And if it's not about land, you're not going to get to peace through a land deal. I think that's the most important thing. And then second, to Zelensky's point, Ukraine has a vote in these negotiations. And if this isn't something they're going to go along with, even if they don't have U.S. support, that doesn't mean they're just going to capitulate.
No, it's interesting. I was talking earlier with Jill Dougherty, former CNN Moscow bureau chief. After Putin seized Crimea in 2014, it was a fake election, but they did have this plebiscite, right? They did have this, we're going to have the citizens of Crimea vote on this. And it was a joke and it wasn't real and it was illegitimate, but there was at least the pretense of that. There's no pretense even here. They're just talking about giving land, let's see if the people of Donbass want to be part of Russia.
No, and there's also a question about how much control Russian the military campaign has even succeeded. So we know that there is now Russian control over Crimea, but the rest of the territory is still an active war zone. And so this idea that you can sort of swap land that may be more taken and held by Russia versus Ukraine, we don't have any kind of facts on that point either. So I think that we haven't even gotten to a ceasefire yet. President Trump has been clear sequentially he wants a ceasefire, and then we can get into details about how we get to sort of even a frozen conflict, make sure Ukraine can stop further Russian aggression. Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire and has since March. It's just been Russia that continues this assault against Ukraine.
Is it not true that, let's say that Vice President Kamala Harris had won and she was doing a peace deal right now or trying to end the war, that no matter what, there was going to be some sort of land concession that Ukraine was going to have to make. I understand that you're saying this is bigger than geography, but in order to bring about peace, Ukraine was going to have to concede some land, Democratic or Republican president. Do you agree with that?
I think so, especially at this point. It's become pretty clear that the Ukrainian military cannot retake all of the land that Russia has taken. So if there was a case where Putin actually was interested in leaving the current government in Kyiv in place, allowing Ukraine to defend itself, and was content with the land, which he wouldn't be, then you would obviously have some kind of demarcation there, and the Ukrainians would have to cede something. I just don't think that's a reality in this.
All right. Jeff Edmonds and Rebecca Heinrichs, thanks to both of you.